Welcome back. We're bringing you continuing coverage of the fact that there appears to have been some progress in the peace talks between Ukraine and Russia that America is brokering. We're hearing from American media that Ukraine has agreed to much of what was in the text of the agreement, but it has to be said that we also heard from Ukraine last night the very same thing. Let's speak to our US correspondent, David Blevins, who joins me now from the United States. David, what are the American media saying about any developments?
Well, Jen, I think it's fair to say that we have less of a breakthrough and more of a briefing at this point, and it is a coordinated briefing. The fact that various US networks were reporting in quick succession this morning here in Washington that Ukraine had backed the Trump-brokered peace plan tells us really that the administration wants to get this message out there, and you've got to ask why. Presumably it is because they believe by doing so they put pressure on the Russians to come closer to the table, despite there being no history of Russia ever buckling to that kind of diplomatic pressure. And I think it's really important to look at the wording as well. It's very vague. Terms like they have reached a common understanding or Ukraine supports the essence of an agreement. That is very far short of a deal. And we've seen so often in the past how President Trump seems to be able to negotiate terms with one side or the other, but not with both together at the same time. We also know, of course, that President Trump is preparing to depart Washington today for the other White House, as it's often described, Mar-a-Lago, his estate in Florida. He's going there for Thanksgiving, which is on Thursday, and is expected to stay there until Sunday, which is the last day of November. So it's interesting to note in the Ukrainian statement that they expect President Zelensky to meet with President Trump at the earliest date in November. That would suggest that the two may come face to face during the Thanksgiving holiday at Mar-a-Lago rather than in Washington. And I've been listening to Michael Clark talking about how Zelensky will have to adopt a strong position in that meeting with Trump if the president appears to take the Russian position during any negotiations. And we've seen in the past how perhaps Volodymyr Zelensky can feel vulnerable in those situations. For example, after the showdown in the White House, the infamous showdown back in February, you will remember that it was European leaders who brought Trump and Zelensky together on the edge of Pope Francis' funeral. And then after the summit between Trump and Putin in the summer, those European leaders came en masse to Washington to support Zelensky. Last month, when the Ukrainian president was back in the White House again for talks, and there were reports of it having descended into a row, he emerged from the White House. Before he even came to brief us in the media, he went into a call with European leaders. So he does appear to rely on them a lot to have his back, and again, they may have a role to play in the coming days.